When Sony announced Insomniac's Spider-Man at E3 2016, it immediately became one of my most anticipated games. 2 years prior, Insomniac put out Sunset Overdrive, a little-known Xbox One exclusive that I happen to love, whose emphasis on free-flowing movement and style proved that Insomniac had the right skill set to tackle the iconic character. However, as Sony showed more and more footage of the game over the years, my interest waned. The gameplay trailers had tons of QuickTime events, and the combat scenarios looked scripted and dull. Add in the focus on open world, and I started to worry about how this thing would turn out. So after playing the game through to completion, is it a disappointment? No, not even close.
Should've worn your seatbelt.
I'm going to start with the gameplay, because that's what I was most concerned about. I find that many games in this open-world style have lackluster, bland mechanics that become even more monotonous as you progress. It's a miracle, then, that Spider-Man's gameplay is what makes it work. After a brief introductory cutscene, the game immediately lets you freely web-swing your way through New York, and this sets the tone of the game quite nicely. It's fast, it's fun, and it doesn't waste your time with the boring stuff. The web swinging feels great here, even after a dozen hours, as it properly conveys the feeling of momentum. Unlike other games where you have to get into a car or mount a horse, you always have instant access to the fastest method of transportation, which makes traversing the world a much less tedious task. The objectives and collectibles complement this nicely as well. I always found myself grabbing backpacks, snapping pictures, and stopping crimes on my way to the next story mission, which is something I generally avoid doing in open-world games these days. These activities are more than just dots on the map. Each one gives out tokens, and these are then used to unlock the staggering amount of web gadgets and suits. From the sound effects to the slow-mo finishers, it's no secret that the Batman Arkham games influenced Spider-Man's combat system, but it is by no means a carbon copy. It's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison either, since Batman is more of a tank and Spider-Man is more of an acrobat, but I think the combat in Spider-Man is far superior. Every fight felt nimble, responsive, and free of frustration, which I cannot say about the Arkham games, and contrary to my suspicion that the game would play itself, the combat isn't completely mindless either. It has a unique rhythm to it and takes some getting used to. It's not crazy difficult or anything, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can die pretty easily. The moveset is somewhat extensive as well. There's melee combos, air moves, and web abilities, but they struck the perfect balance of complexity and simplicity. I never found myself relying on the same 2 or 3 moves, and as I unlocked more, they meshed well with the existing ones. There's stealth here as well, and it's admittedly very similar to Arkham, but it's solid, and outside of a few specific instances, you're never forced to use it.
Right. I'll clear a path.
Try to do it quietly.
Will do.
So far, we have a really good movement system, enjoyable combat, and a competent open world. At this point, any other developer would have stopped, slapped a bunch of missions on top of the world map, and called it a day, and given how great the gameplay is, that probably would have been a decent game, but Insomniac was not aiming for decent. Instead, this is where the game is taken to the next level. Spider-Man is not just an open world, it features a fully fleshed out story with tons of bespoke areas, and the open world is just a bonus on top. It makes every other title in this style look lazy in comparison.
Do you remember why we broke up?
This is a trick question, isn't it?
Saved by the siren.
Talk to you later.
Go.
Love seeing you two together again. You always were my favorites.
In this completely new universe, Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for 8 years and is 24 years old. This unique perspective allowed them to avoid a number of cliches like the death of Uncle Ben and the radioactive spider. That's not to say that these essential things didn't happen, they did, we just don't have to sit through them for the 100th time. There's no arc here where the police think he's a criminal or he loses his powers either. Instead, we get to see him balance his professional career, relationships, and vigilante persona. This game covers the full range of Spider-Man's life, from the mundane to the world-ending, and manages to do it all in a captivating way. Character-wise, I think it's a slam dunk. They packed in a healthy amount of personalities without going overboard, and as a result, almost everyone gets enough time to be developed. MJ was the surprise standout for me here, because they made her character more than just a plot device. Peter and MJ start the game having recently broken up, and while they do predictably get back together by the end, the way that they get there is the real highlight. These two have one of the most believable and natural relationships that I've ever seen in a game. Without seeing a single flashback, I got the sense that these two have a deep and rich history.
Excuse me, miss. Are you supposed to be here?
More than you. After that auction house thing, the Bugle put me on the city beat, which means I get to focus full-time on real stories like this. And the demons.
You know the closer you get to them, the more you become a target, right?
The closer I get, the better chance we have to stop them.
We?
MJ plays a crucial role beyond being Peter's girlfriend, though. In this game, she's the world's most persistent investigative journalist, and that makes her return to Peter's life inevitable. The main source of conflict in their relationship comes not from MJ hating Peter being Spider-Man, but rather from Peter not being comfortable with her investigative escapades. The irony here, of course, being that Peter is putting himself in danger on a daily basis. It's understandable, though, as Peter doesn't think he's in danger because he literally has superpowers, whereas MJ is a soft target, and that's what makes it work. At this point in the relationship, she knows that he's not going to stop being Spider-Man, but she does want him to recognize that she's perfectly capable of contributing in her own way. Another big character here is Miles Morales, who gets a solid arc that parallels Peter's past. I think what made him compelling for me was how he interacted with both Peter and Spider-Man without knowing they were the same person. Peter looks out for him as if he was a younger brother, and there's this wonderful moment where Spider-Man swoops in to help Miles in a fight and afterward teaches him how to defend himself.
You're Spider-Man. You're the amazing Spider-Man. You're the spectacular Spider-Man.
And a few other choice adjectives Jameson uses. Look, that was really brave. But next time, leave the fighting to the pros, okay?
Adding another dimension to both Miles and MJ are the sections where they're playable characters. It not only gives us a different perspective, but helps to break up the gameplay. There's plenty of other essential characters here as well, like Aunt May and Norman Osborn, and the performances are stellar across the board. Villain-wise, the game is not lacking by any stretch of the imagination, as the main villain, who I won't spoil here, makes up for any shortcomings, but everyone else could have been a little better. While they do get some amazing fights, characters like Rhino, Vulture, and Shocker aren't deep, and that's fine since they're not supposed to be, but Mr. Negative and Kingpin felt underdeveloped. The game begins with Spider-Man taking down Kingpin, and it seems like he's going to come back later on, but outside of a phone call, he never does. They must plan on giving him a bigger role in the sequel. Mr. Negative is advertised as being the game's main villain, and unlike Kingpin, he does get a lot of screen time, but as a character, he falls short. His motivations are explained, but the whole setup is a little too convenient and rushed. Again, the secret villain here is enough to carry the weight of all the other villains' flaws. If you play the game yourself, you'll probably see this twist coming a mile away, which must be intentional, but the execution and implications of it lead to the massive payoff that is the ending. The story here is every bit as good, and in some ways better, than the best MCU films. The relationships feel real, the events have consequences, and there are genuinely touching moments. This is an accomplishment not just for a comic book adaptation, but for a game in general, and you don't need to be a hardcore Marvel Comics fan to enjoy it. The best part is that you're not going to be playing through the story just to see what happens, as the missions themselves are stupidly fun. It's set piece after set piece, spectacle after spectacle, and while there are QuickTime events, the vast majority of it is fully playable. Elevator shafts become a level of Frogger, and the side of a skyscraper becomes a stealth mission. The inclusion of an open world did not come at the cost of an inferior main story. Finally, we end with visuals. Given how impressive every other aspect of the game is, it should come as no surprise that it holds up here as well. I was initially lukewarm on the presentation, as it sometimes mixes a slightly cartoonish style with realistic lighting and effects in a jarring way, but I came out thinking that the game looked great. Spider-Man himself is flawless. With few exceptions, the suits look photorealistic, and the animations are stunning. Most of the main character models are highly detailed when they need to be, and the lighting in particular is superb. This is the first game I'm playing on PS4 Pro, and the bump in resolution certainly helps, but I imagine this is still a good-looking game on the standard PlayStation 4.
Hey, it's your crime system thingy. Looks like a residential break-in.
Charles Standish.
That sounds familiar. Oh, Oscorp CFO. Wait. You don't think this has anything to do with Lee, do you?
Sorry to cook and run.
Did you just leave your clothes on the kitchen floor?
Where do you want me to,
Just a couch is fine.
See you later?
Yeah.
There's not much more to say about Spider-Man, because there's no one thing here that's super innovative or new. Instead, it's the quality of the parts and how well it's structured that makes this game so good. The most exciting thing about the game is the future that it opens up. Given how well it's selling, a sequel is inevitable, but the references to the larger Marvel universe within this game give me hope for an Insomniac Marvel universe. Hopefully Disney agrees. Last year, Horizon Zero Dawn put a high level of polish on the Ubisoft style of game. This year, Spider-Man redefines what constitutes a well-made game in this ever-popular genre. I'm feeling a 9 out of 10 on Spider-Man. It's phenomenal and easily the best game to come out so far in 2018. I know I'm late with the review, but I loved the game so much that I had to do it. If you played it yourself, let me know what you thought, and if you have a PS4 but didn't play it, what the hell are you doing? Until next time, thanks for watching.